Alright, greetings everybody and welcome to another video. It is morning here. I feel refreshed. I did one more pull on Sadali, Spanner, and got absolutely nothing. Alright, bitterness aside, as always, with bad pulls. Today we're going to be taking two videos in turn, taking a look individually at these two new glove users, and then we're going to kind of do what I'm going to call a Wotv Highlander video, where I'm going to pick the one that I think is actually best if you can only get one of the two characters, taking into account, what is currently meta and everything. And today I thought we'd start with the Flame Sorcerer. The big reason I want to start with the Flame Sorcerer is that I think that early reviews of him have put him in an interesting spot, all things considered. With being considered to be one of the strongest offensive characters in the game right now, he definitely has a pretty strong title there. However, with the caveat that he is basically one of the worst interpersonal characters, and what I mean by that is, PvP matchups, he's actually not very good. So we're going to take a look at him today. The Wotv calc data is already up, and that might to get into that really quickly first, that might explain just a little bit more about why this character Trust Mastery is the way it is, with the essentially decreased chance of being targeted by 6, because you never want this character to end up being targeted. I don't think that there is much of a way that you can run Flame Sorcerer in a very conventional list. I think positioning and everything will be incredibly important with him, seeing that, again, he's just not a super great interpersonal character. He really does have this general problem that if he is put up against characters who are just too much stronger than him and he doesn't have enough protection, he'll essentially fall. So you are probably looking to put him with any kind of very effective tank that has been released in the last 8 months, such as old Doa, even if you can manage to swing that with the vision cards. I haven't thought about too much about it yet, but that's just like an initial thought. But that's how far of an extreme I think you need to go to get this character to be successful. But performance tests are important. Taking a look, I think that overall this is pretty net positive for the equipment and everything. We got nice single target resistance here, we got nice speed, we got nice HP, and we got nice magic. All of that compares incredibly favorably well to what is essentially pretty much a last gen mage like this. Now, Shrek is one of our big considerations for both evaluating our two new glove characters today. But needless to say, he should slot in incredibly easy with Sephiroth right now, and potentially also Shrek too, with very little performance loss. But again, really want that third spot to be a tank to draw a lot of fire. I don't think this is a character also that you run with any other healers, because he has a ton of healing himself in his own kit that will probably be self-sustainable. The other thing is that probably I think that you just want to crank as much HP as possible, given that we're going to see he has fairly good survivability with some of his anti-physical attacks. But yeah, I think I have talked enough on this screen. Let's get into the actual match. Or test, I should say. Test. Also, Dream Enhancement, that's something we haven't talked about, but debuff effect weakening of 20 for self, meaning it's harder to debuff this guy, and reducing magical damage the larger the AoE attack. All that, I think, is pretty neat in making him just generally really, really strong. So we'll go over here. We will not waste too much time today, just start getting directly into buffing. Let's pick up that treasure chest too, because we are not monsters. We are, just not monsters. And then over here, no. No. Get those buffs going, barriers and whatnot. Lots of buffs needing to be had. And then we'll take a moment here and take a look at a couple of skills of his. We already covered his support skills yesterday, decreasing his skill activation time and reducing physical and magical damage the larger the attack, as well as magic, spirit penetration, and AoE resistance penetration, which is what is contributing to this guy being such an effective killer. All of that is really good, and his counter ability, just evading physical, adds a lot to him being incredibly resilient to any kind of physical meta. Excuse me, my throat's a little bad today, so try and bear with it. I apologize. Should have added that at the beginning of the video, but here we go. Starting off with this ability, decreasing skill activation time by a considerable amount, 350 for 5 turns is pretty awesome. Also increasing magic attack resistance penetration rate for himself by 40 for 4 turns. All of that is just incredibly strong for increasing his own power. Reduces physical damage taken by 25% for 3 turns, and gains a new counter skill as well, which is all pretty well and good. Taking a look at that counter skill, chance to counter physical damage with an attack, pretty good range of 4 or 5. It's kind of a little bit small, but yeah, and 100% hit chance on that counter too, which is pretty awesome. If they don't have reaction block, there's a good chance they will get hit by it. This, of course, is the Trust Mastery skill, which gives Human Killer on magic attacks and Hatred down. And his last support skill, not just for him, for allies too, grants Protect and Shell for 4 turns, reduces physical and magical damage taken the larger the AoE attack, gives him auto revive, and also activates a skill on auto revive 2, which, just taking a look here, decreases his skill activation time as well, as I think restores some CT for self. So let's cast this ability first. We're going to take a few swings at this guy with some of our other characters and just take a peek. So first off, Helena, not a super good example of magical damage. However, I've already checked out a few videos demoing this guy against Shrekken, and Shrekken is still hitting quite hard, potentially upwards of 6,000, depending on vision cards and equipment. But the big note there is that's not a kill on this guy, and that's super important. There is a generally good chance that even if he catches some straight fire from an AoE attack or from a multi-target single attack, that he will just survive. But anyway, AoEs, as you can see here, not particularly too much damage, so we'll pass on Helena, and we'll just go over here, making sure we're moving our characters this time so that we can demo out a bunch. So first off, Water Physical. Now again, this character is pretty anti-physical, and you would expect a character like June to both be really good against this guy and also potentially not really good. He is, a lot of his kit is anti-physical and anti, big attacks. So June here, you would expect her to be maybe a little bit weak, but since our vision card setup isn't particularly overly defensive in this case, taking a look at him, 45 single target and very little AoE, there is tons of room for overhead improvement depending on what vision cards come out. And as I've stated previously, Sadali coming out this week means that there will be a second glove vision card this month at the very least to potentially give this character a bunch of boosts towards survivability. The current one that's already out gives single target attack resistance, I think is pretty noteworthy. Taking a look at single target, you can see this more in action where it's cut down to about 4,867. What I take away from this initial attack is essentially that June, a strong water character, one of the strongest water characters in the game, arguably, about who also might be in that category, but I do think that it's quite telling that she can't get a kill on this character. Character that is generally not super good even into water matchups, because unlike Sadali, he doesn't have a ton of extra elemental resistance, is still holding up pretty well even against a really powerful water character. So we'll just cast some abilities and move on. Taking a look here, also Ashen Mont, another very strong character in the game, physical, but still is also able to do quite a bit of damage. Silence, as you can see there, not a super big threat, but could potentially shut him down. And just taking a look at some single target attacks, his physical resistance is pretty good for casting a single buff. Sephiroth here, Curse is probably the thing that will effectively take this character down a considerable peg. As I've said before, catching too much stray fire will probably not be good for this character, hence why the third you want a tank to protect him more than you want a healer, which is something that kind of takes Resnick out of the discussion. I don't think you can run, at least initially, be greedy enough to run a tank and a healer to support this guy. I don't think that there is enough physical DPS there, magical DPS to really counterattack a 3-team attacker, which does kind of insert this problem of Curse. A lot of this character's kit is regenerating HP, and if Curse is a lot of places, which it currently still is, because Resnick is a limited character and not permanently in the pool, it does leave a lot of opening for a character like Sephiroth here to pretty effectively shut down a major part of his kit. And as you can see, it's still dealing pretty good damage. Either way, we will do our buff. Move on. All right. Now, before we get into casting his secondary buff here, which is a lot of physical damage, let's just take a look and see some of the damage that we are doing. That poor wolf. But as you can see here, absolutely murdering Sephiroth, not Sephiroth, but Gilgamesh, my bad, misspoke, but dealing considerable damage with his limit burst already before we get into any other buffs. As I've mentioned previously, he also has light and dark base damage attacks, which is pretty interesting for just having alternate damage at source, not being completely resilient on fire. And as you can see here, Gilgamesh isn't doing particularly well against this character in any state. And this, I think, is pretty interesting too. In his sub-job, he does have darkness, and darkness has a pretty high chance of activating. It's not something that's super thought of in the meta, which means you have a pretty high chance of it activating and people not running any defense against it, making it pretty good currently. All right, but with that said, let's cast our next ability where we're getting some DPS up and on. All right, do our little shuffle and buffing, trying to keep that turn order not too terribly high. You good? No, no. Misclicks. Right, and we've pretty much cast everything that we need to here. We're not going to cast the Trust Mastery skill on this one, just because at this point we do know what it is, and it's pretty self-explanatory. 25 magic human killer for 4 turns, which I honestly think will just, you know, if we really need to consider it, it is just extra DPS on top of what we are already doing. There's a pretty good chance of him casting it. Since he only has 2 support skills in his base kit, he's not doing too terribly much, and will have plenty of room for his AI to throw in a attack skill, providing that, you know, the map is conducive. But here, taking a look, Limit Burst, dealing roughly about the same, but still pretty effective. That Limit Burst is also giving him a magic damage increase. It also has 100% hit chance, and if it's hitting 3 or more targets, it gets a 75% boost on top of the 215% it's already sporting. Taking a look at his other attack skills, his basic one decreases magic attack, which is kind of nice when you're going up against a mage. If you are, at the end of a match and it was just one mage versus this guy, this is a pretty good low-cost ability to make you at least favorable to come out on top. Taking a look at some other skills, we have chance to reduce counter, 100% chance to hit, restore HP or increase magic. This is one of his very early on advertised skill. Not this one. Which one is it? This ability right here. Now, if his HP is below 60%, it will effectively heal him. He does have a little bit of support for increasing his healing too from equipment. And if his HP is over 60%, then he actually gets a magic percent boost, which is a 80% attack boost. Now, this is one of the ones we are super curious about. Let's take a look here. Now, we're not doing too terribly much, and as you can see, we're not killing Gilgamesh. But since we've run a fair amount of buffs on characters, we are generally pretty strong. Still, let's fire off this attack, shall we? And as you can see, almost an instant cast with a CT boost there too. So let's just skip ahead and get to Flame Sorcerer's next turn. Now, this is a 1-turn boost, which means that you don't have too terribly long to use it, but we are supporting now almost 2,000 in a non-magical focused vision card setup, which I think is very, very positive towards how much DPS this character can do. Now, taking a look at that Limit Burst, we are doing considerably more damage firing it off on the second turn against a multitude of different characters. And these attacks, again, I have checked out and I have seen that he is capable of killing Shreks, which is super, super good. Last things to talk about in his kit is the fact that this ability does get improved into his EX to decrease spirit and also just increase spirit. And his job level 25 does get rid of magical barriers. That is our ability right here at 30 AP. It's also sure hit, so evasion is not necessarily much of a problem, and it absorbs 50% of the damage done. Given everything that is possible in this character's kit, I do think that he is quite powerful. Devout gives him a little bit of support, and Operative potentially gives him a chance of evasion. However, I think the big thing, if you are running Operative, is the decreased chance of being targeted to run a different Trust Mastery that could be beneficial to the character. Either way, Flame Sorcerer does look pretty good on paper. He has a lot of stuff that you would essentially want, including just a massive amount of attack power, but he still is evaluated as being, how do I say this, not super, super strong. And yeah, that might be a little bit counterintuitive to what people think, but I mean, Curse doesn't work particularly well, and I think that without the right team composition, he probably won't be incredibly successful. But there's still a few question marks that the other piece of event equipment could change the discussion considerably as to how good he is. We do kind of want just good DPS characters, but we do need a bit of survivability, and certain things just kind of shut down his survivability. So we'll keep an eye out, but I think it is a pretty positive first look for this new character. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and see you later.